Hey YouTube, this is Robert Ness816 and this is going to be another video on the Model 1 Sega CD. So this is a different machine. This one I'm actually recapping for someone, and this is going to be a good example about why I'm against selling these Sega CDs for a premium price when they haven't been tested or when they haven't had any work done to them. So right now on eBay these are going for an average anywhere from I want to say $100 to $150 for just the console with an AC adapter. So that's not even including a Genesis console, which to me is not really fair. If you're going to sell one of these for $150, it should come with the Sega CD, the joining plate, the Genesis console, 2 AC adapters, the right ones of course, and of course an AV cable and 1 or 2 controllers. I don't like selling these things for full price when they are not complete. So complete to me, includes all those things mentioned. These Genesis consoles, this is your typical Model 1 HD graphics here, without dropping everything. Your typical Model 1 HD graphics Genesis, these are like a dime a dozen. They're easy to find. You can stick whatever, Model 1 you want on there, but it's just what I have. But, these consoles, you can get them all day for like 20 bucks, so just throw it in with the price. It'll make it that much easier. But these consoles will either work or they won't work. Most of the time it will need a belt for the CD-ROM drive. Or if it's a Sony drive like this one is, it will need a belt. It will need new contacts, or not new contacts, but the contacts for the limiter switches rather will need to be cleaned. So the best way to do that was how I showed you in my previous video, where I actually unsoldered it from the board and cleaned it, because the reason being is that this drawer has limiter switches for the laser, so when these get dirty, there's basically nothing telling the laser to stop coming back once it has reached the end of its track, so the motor will keep spinning. So over time that will actually damage the laser, and pretty much your $150 unit goes down the tubes, because basically you got to find another parts one to fix it. Also, there's 2 stop switches for the drawer that need to be cleaned up as well. So the Sony drives, while they're the most common, they're also the ones that always need the most amount of work. The JVC drives are more reliable in that regard, so those are a little bit quicker as far as repairs go, because those usually just need a belt, just like these do. The other thing is capacitors. So you saw in my other video where I recapped the Sega CD Model 1, and that was because the caps on that system were leaking. And they were leaking because they're surface mount capacitors, and when they age, they pretty much leak. That's what happens with them. So what I have here is a little packet of electrolytic capacitors. So these will work just fine on these consoles. I use these capacitors on the main board. And they're much larger than the originals, but I don't have any problems fitting them under the RF shielding. And they will not only last longer, but they will, the likelihood of them leaking all over the place and ruining your board is much less. So without any more blabbering, I'm going to show you the inside of this Sega CD Model 1. Mind you, like I said, it does work perfectly fine. I already replaced the belt in the drive, and I did clean up the limiter switches. But I am going to show you the capacitors on this board, and I'm going to go into why I'm against selling these things for full price after they haven't been tested. So I'll pretty much, show you guys what it looks like if nothing has been done to it. Alright, so this is what I'm talking about here with these leaking capacitors. You can see all around here there is electrolyte leaking all onto the ground plane on this board. So the pads on this particular capacitor here have corroded. You can see how the solder isn't really shiny anymore. And this electrolyte is going to damage this metal, because it is, after all, just soft metal. Let's see, where else? Where's another one that's leaking? We have this one right here that's leaking, and pretty badly too. As you can see, it's affected the solder mask on the board. So you can see right here where it's all kind of bubbling up and stuff, so I have to be really careful when I solder that. And mind you, the more that you use this particular console, the more this electrolyte will continue to leak out and damage the board until eventually your console is ruined. So like I said before, this console does work fine, But as you can see here, these capacitors are leaking all over the place. So right here you have a little bit of electrolyte leaking around the ground plane here. And this needs to be replaced. These memory chips will be ruined eventually because you will get electrolyte on these pins, which will destroy them, and you can't get these memory chips anymore. You really can't get any of the components on this board anymore except for capacitors and little clock oscillators like this, and the save battery. So yeah, I mean, all these need to be changed before it completely destroys the system and basically makes it into a little parts console. You can see this capacitor here is leaking too. So, and then these two in the back here are also leaking. You can see the stuff all over there by the positive sign. So these little electrolyte caps, these are usually pretty good. They don't really go bad. They'll lose their tolerance over time, but they really don't leak like these little electrolytic capacitors do, or surface mount caps. The same thing goes with these caps as well. These are fine too. I mean, you really don't have to change these. You can if you really wanted to, be anal about this, but there really is no reason to change those. Your main focus is always going to be on these little crappy surface mount dealies. So I actually have others right here that I saved. These are from my second Sega CD that I own. So these caps were actually good. They weren't leaking yet, but it's good just to change them as preventative maintenance. So, and this is actually a leaking capacitor from a Star Fox cartridge. So you can see it's not just Sega stuff, it's Nintendo products as well that have issues with leaking surface mount capacitors. So something else I just thought I'd show you guys is look at the solder pads here on these on this board. So you can see how they're all corroded and everything. So now I have to check these all for continuity to make sure they're still good. But yeah, I mean, this, you keep using a console like this and you're just going to destroy it. I mean, look at these two right here. I didn't even have to unsolder these really. They just kind of like fell off and broke apart. Let me see if I can get a better shot of this. So here you can see them a little bit better, hopefully, and you can see just what I'm dealing with here. So not only do you have to either fix this yourself after paying $150, you have to maybe pay someone else if you're not able to do this work, and that'll probably run you maybe another $40 or $50. Okay, so right here you can see where I attempted to put a little bit of solder on this pad, and as you can see, it's just too much crap on there. So I have to scrape away this top layer of what used to be solder in order to put solder on this pad. I did actually spray this entire board down with contact cleaner and scrub it down with a toothbrush in an effort to try to remove any more electrolytic fluid that might have dried on this board. So as you can see, all of these pads here need to be cleaned up now, and they need to be reflowed. So I was lucky enough that I didn't rip off any of these pads, but as you can see, all of them are not looking so good at the moment. And it seems like these two right here by the memory always seem to get pretty bad. C45 and C46 seem to always suffer the worst, and that's a shame too because they're right next to these memory chips, which, like I said, you can't get. But these two right here are also usually pretty bad, and I think this is for the video, I believe was what these 4 chips are for. Not sure. But yeah, all this needs to be cleaned up. Alright, so another Sega CD Model 1 saved from bad capacitors. So always make sure the person replaced the capacitors, and make sure they show pictures of the board. Just don't assume that it works or it's good because it works. These things always have issues. So that's all. Alright, so all recapped, ready to go. It's I'm just letting it run through its demo mode right now. So just let it do stuff. Make sure it doesn't freeze or glitch or anything. So I'm happy, guys. Nothing like saving another Sega CD Model 1. The most unreliable console ever made, but with a little bit of effort they can be made reliable again.